with us we have Vladislav Kulminski. He's the Executive Director of the Moldovan Institute for Strategic Initiatives, joining us over Skype. Welcome. The Constitutional Court in Moldova last week suspended President Dodon's powers for the third time in as many months. In October and in January too, the suspensions were related to President Dodon rejecting nominations for parliamentary candidates, for parliamentary appointments. And the latest suspension was imposed on January 5 after President Dodon tried to stop a bill with relation to Russian broadcasts. Could you explain to us what these decisions mean and what's going on at the moment?
Well, there's a fight for power and for authority between the president and the ruling majority, which is run by the Democratic Party. All power in the country is controlled by the Democratic Party and its leader. And President Dodon is trying to establish himself as a player in Moldovan politics. There's an election coming up in November, so this is all pretty much a game to show who is running the show in the Republic of Moldova. The government wants to undertake certain moves. They want to change people, at the top. They want to change ministers. The president opposes this, but he has no power and no authority to actually stop this. So he refuses to sign those government reshuffles, but the government simply pushes them through, regardless of what the president wants or what the president doesn't want. And as you said, it has happened 3 times. And by doing this, the government shows to the entire world that the president doesn't really have the powers and the authority. And domestically, it significantly hurts the president's ratings, so that, his chances of winning the parliamentary elections in November diminish as more and more people become convinced that he doesn't really have the authority or the power to change things in Moldova.
How powerful is President Dodon at the moment?
Well, in Moldova at the moment, the president has largely ceremonial powers. Moldova used to be a parliamentary republic where the president is elected by the parliament. But a year and a half ago, in order to break up mass protests, the Democratic Party changed the system, and the Constitutional Court restored direct popular elections of the president. This was an extremely controversial decision, which, as I said, was designed to break up mass protests that threatened the rule of the Democratic Party. All opposition leaders, rather than fighting the Democratic Party, they rushed to compete in the presidential elections. But when Moldova became a presidential parliamentary republic, the president still has very limited authority. So the whole idea of Mr. Dodon winning that election was that he promised to fight the government and to fight the unpopular government for what he is worth. He promised to investigate the theft of $1 billion from Moldovan banks. He promised to fight rampant corruption, and he promised to fight for early elections through mass protests. He didn't do any of that. And that is why his political ratings diminish by the day. And by the time we get to parliamentary elections in November, it is quite likely that he will not be able to get a parliamentary majority as he and his partners in the Russian Federation hope. So the power of the presidency at the moment is that it has popular support. And it is by using this popular support that the president could organize mass protests in Moldova and, take people to the streets against the unpopular government, etc. So direct democracy was the only tool available to him to really impact and influence the decisions of the government. But otherwise, because the president is not doing it, he's afraid. All the power is concentrated in the hands of the Democratic Party. He's afraid to pick up a direct fight. So he largely sort of does all the ceremonial steps by refusing to sign things, saying that I'm not going to do this and that, and he threatens with consequences. But in reality, very little of it happens.
You've talked a little bit about the parliamentary elections, which are due to happen at the end of the year. Can you tell us a little bit more about what kind of result we can expect from these elections?
The result of these elections are going to be momentous, and they're really going to have a very momentous impact on where Moldova is going. At the moment, we have three major political forces that will compete in those elections. First is the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party has all the tools and levers of power. They control all institutions in the Republic of Moldova, including the prosecutor's office, courts, the Constitutional Court, and all other institutions. The second political force is the Socialist Party, led by President Dodon. This party has a lot of popular support, but very little access to real power. And the third competitor is the pro-European right of the center political forces, led by Maya Sandu and Andrei Nastase. They do not have any access to so-called administrative resources, but they also have some popular legitimacy and popular support. The Democratic Party enjoys very little popular support. It is within, a margin of error, within 45%. But it is extremely important for the Democratic Party to keep power, because if they lose the parliamentary elections in November of 2018, then over the next 4 to 5 years, we're going to see the next government pretty much investigating what the previous government did. So there are going to be a lot of consequences.
Mm-hmm. And President Dodon is characterized as a pro-Russian politician. How accurate is that?
I don't think it is accurate at all. I mean, what people are fighting for is real power, and coalitions in the Republic of Moldova shift. And once people get to power, they quickly understand what the limits of the possible are. So I think it is more of an artificial division between East and West. It's just different political forces are trying to position themselves in this way, to appeal to certain voters, to evoke emotions. Politics is all about emotions. But in reality, these alliances can really shift quite rapidly. And even if Mr. Dodon wins the parliamentary election at the end of this year, it doesn't mean that he will necessarily turn Moldova towards Russia, because there will be certain realities that he will have to deal with, such as, Moldova sending over half of its exports to the European Union, and the Transnistrian region, which is not controlled by the Moldovan government, doing the same. So, to come back a little bit to your previous question, what the Democratic Party did, they, in order to keep power, they changed the election system. Previously, Moldova had a proportional election system where all members of parliament, 101 members of parliament, were elected on party lists. Under that proportional system, the Democratic Party, which has a rating of 4 to 5%, had no chance of winning this election at all. So they decided to change the system. They moved to a mixed system where 51 seats would be elected on party lists and 50 seats would be elected in single-member constituencies. And as we know, single-member constituencies, as we know from Ukraine and from Georgia, from Russia's experience, single-member constituencies tend to favor the parties that hold power. So by changing the election system, the Democratic Party has significantly increased its chances of winning the largest number of seats in the parliamentary election. So the likely outcome of the elections in November looks as follows. The Socialist Party is likely to poll approximately 38, 39 seats at the parliament. The Democratic Party will have 30 to 32 seats at the parliament. Pro-European forces will have up to 25 seats at the parliament. And then the Democratic Party would be the one leading the creation of the new coalition and therefore keeping itself in office. So that's what the entire game plan here is. Mm-hmm.
And a recent survey from the Institute of Marketing and Surveys says that Moldova's support for joining the EU is growing. Their participants, 60% of their participants in late 2017 said they were for joining the EU, and that's up from about 45% in early 2017. Is this a shift for joining the EU? Is that a shift that you've seen on the ground?
Look, I mean, I think these are quite relative numbers. What people in Moldova want, they want economic opportunities, they want stability, they want law and order, because these basic public goods do not exist in the Republic of Moldova. So whichever party is seen as being able to deliver these public goods holds power and has, the best chances of winning the elections. And, being pro-Russian or pro-European, it's quite relative in Moldova's context today, because the country is in bad economic condition. Wages and salaries in the country are quite low. People are living, and so it's really more about the basic things. But with respect to the European Union, I don't think that anybody really has serious doubts that this is the way for Moldova to go. Because you can't really join the customs union over Ukraine. It's just not possible. So whatever Mr. Dodon promises in this respect is simply not realistic. Moldova sends pretty much the largest share of its exports to the European Union, as does the Transnistrian region. Moldova has very deep institutional relations with the European Union. Approximately 25 to 30% of Moldova's budgetary support comes from the European Union, which is a lot, and this is the money without which Moldova would not be able to meet its social commitments, pay pensions and salaries, etc. So those ties are very deep, and whichever party wins the parliamentary elections in November 2018 would necessarily have to take into account those very deep ties that simply cannot be broken just in one turn. It's just institutionally not possible for Moldova to make a rapid U-turn and somehow look in the other direction.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. That was Vladislav Kulminski joining us from Moldova.